Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good Wednesday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 29th of July. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date on your local weather information and know the risks before you go out. Weather.gov/Alaska is a great way to get that process started and start a conversation in your community about how to stay safe, even if it's just about staying dry when the next rainstorm approaches. ARH.NOAA.gov is the same website. It'll take you to the same information. Weather Info Line is a good place to get the forecast anytime, 800-472-0391. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube. And on Twitter, use the hashtag AKwx. Even if you just want to post a really nice picture from your community or village, use that hashtag, and that lets the National Weather Service and the community around you in Alaska know that you're talking about Alaska weather. That's what AKwx stands for. So use that often and regularly, and we'll be watching as well and sharing your pictures too. Here's a look at the fire danger. Things really haven't changed too much since we talked yesterday or the day before. We're still watching some drier brush up across the upper Yukon, all the way out across the Noatak and Kobuk valleys, and just a little bit east of Kotzebue Sound and into the areas north of Galena. You start to see some better or higher risks for fire danger there, moving into the extreme levels. Around the Copper River Basin and the eastern Alaska Range, we also have some drier terrain. And because of that, the fire danger remains high there. But nowhere else in the state is seeing the greater threats like that. In fact, many in South Central have dropped to at least a low or even a moderate stage of fire danger. Some nice changes there due to recent rains. Southwest and western Alaska also seeing some improved conditions there thanks to some of the cooler and wetter air. Here's a look at the satellite picture. And speaking of that, if you're in the Kenai Peninsula or north toward Hope or south, you'll notice that you've seen quite a bit of rainfall in the last 12 hours or so, especially in the northern half of the Kenai Peninsula. A lot of thunder and lightning very close to the northwestern coast there, generally north of Clam Gulch, and some of that is lifting northward. We're starting to see some rainfall across Anchorage. Just like yesterday and the day before, any rain really in southern Alaska or the interior or under the thunderstorms that have been popping up across the interior and along the Alcan today, any of those areas that are experiencing showers could be heavy at times. There's enough moisture in the atmosphere that many of those will probably douse you for at least a few minutes before moving on. So be prepared for a brief but heavy downpour. There are no watches, warnings, or advisories out for any part of Alaska due to that rainfall issue right now. But again, that could be brief and heavy as it moves through. For southeastern Alaska, low pressure is working up from the eastern part of the Alaska, the Gulf of Alaska, I should say. You can see that starting to see a little bit of rotation here. This is bringing up some warm and wet air into the eastern Gulf, and as it does so, we'll probably see a better chance for some increased gusts across southern southeast, as well as maybe a better chance for some locally heavy rainfall there as we get into the next several days. Out across the west, this long swath of clouds moving up through the central and western Aleutians is an occluded front and low pressure that's working its way closer and closer to the central and western chain. You can see this on the visible satellite picture. There's this center of low pressure there, and the frontal boundary slowly working in from the south, and it kind of lines up in parallel fashion there. As it does so, we'll see stronger easterly winds developing throughout tonight and tomorrow, probably bringing up to small craft advisory levels there, about 20 to 25 knots or so. It doesn't look like we'll see a whole lot of stronger winds there, and certainly not a whole lot of rain east of that point. But for Adak and westward toward Kiska and Shemya, don't be surprised if you get into at least a little bit of that rain, and some of that too could be slightly wetter than normal, a little bit of an improved chance for precipitation for you. Now looking at the interior with visible satellite picture, once again we're focusing on kind of these ripples and these bumps that you see across areas north of Fairbanks, south toward Anchorage. That is daytime heating working with plenty of moisture and bubbling up those clouds, and some of those have turned into thunderstorms at this hour. Watch the loop one more time and keep your eye on the interior there, and you can see how that forms quickly in the day with the daytime heating there, especially north of the Alaska Range and right along the Yukon Valley and westward. North of that, when we get into the Brooks Range, you'll see a lot more of a smoother shape to the clouds, and unfortunately we lose some of the scan just north of the Brooks Range itself, so we don't see a great amount of detail there. Unfortunately, that is a known issue. You'll notice that a lot of these areas here are low clouds. These are showing us fog and stratus, and that continues to be an issue there as we have kind of an onshore flow. But the weather's changing up across the North Slope with high pressure now east of AKwx. This is giving more of an easterly flow, so this is going to change the weather up a little bit more in the coming days and also move the ice around. If you're watching for the sea ice image, we'll routinely show that right before we get to our marine weather maps here in the second half of the show, so stay tuned for that. In southeastern Alaska, watch for light rainfall today. We also saw showers and thunderstorms around the Alcan border with weak low pressure up around Eagle. That's at about 1,011 millibars. A trough of low pressure lies just south of the Brooks Range and stretches up to about Kotzebue Sound. We still have high pressure across the southern Bering Sea at 1,018 millibars. And there's that wave of low pressure across the North Pacific I was talking about. This is continuing to work its way northward. Ahead of that, more stable air and areas of fog and stratus should be expected tonight. Across most of the Bering Sea, you might run into a few showers there just north of the Pribilovs and west of St. Matthew. Showers should be expected around southwestern Alaska, the Alaska Peninsula, and high pressure is trying as hard as it can to set up around south central Alaska. It's not terribly strong, but it is starting to work, and because of that we're seeing a few more sunny breaks there. I'm not expecting a whole lot of sunny breaks tonight, of course, as we're losing daylight like a bad habit. But up and down the Cook Inlet today, because we did see some sunny breaks, we did get that to fire up with showers and thunderstorms across the Kenai Peninsula, which is exactly where we are right now. Showers and thunderstorms are possible across the middle Tanana Valley and eastward as we head through the evening hours. That should settle down. You'll see a little bit more of a clear sky as you head up toward Allakaket and westward toward the Noatak and Kobuk Valleys into the Norton Sound and around Unalakleet. And for southeast, expect periods of light rain to come and go with high pressure trying to sit just across the British Columbia coastline and into the Pacific Northwest. As we get into Thursday, high pressure is still trying to hold on to south central Alaska and kind of elbow its way into the weather picture a little bit. Showers and thunderstorms are a little more likely tomorrow, especially around the mountains and some of the higher terrain and foothills on both sides of the Alaska Range, because as we break up more of those clouds, thanks to high pressure, if we get a little sunshine, that helps to destabilize the atmosphere and then adds in another chance for showers and thunderstorms, and of course that means more clouds. So it kind of works against itself just a little bit here. High pressure is just north and east of AKwx once again. This should give us a light easterly wind that's moving a lot of the ice again, kind of at a easterly fashion, but the overall trend is for that ice to slowly work its way north and northeast. You'll see the ice pack again in just a few. Low pressure is still easing up on the Aleutians, but it's really not going to get a whole lot further than that because high pressure sitting west of Nunivak Island strong enough to hold it at bay. That's at 1,020 millibars, and low pressure across southeast is still working its way north and east at 1,015 millibars. Again, the best chance for some of the heavier rain and probably gusts will be south of Sitka for Ketchikan, Craig, Klawock, and Annette. So we'll watch for some changes there and probably some turbulence in the aviation forecast as well in a few minutes. Showers and thunderstorms will still be possible as we get into Friday, but you'll notice that trend is going down now as we get into Friday and Saturday. In fact, high pressure coming in from the west should start to take over more parts of southern Alaska and maybe more of the interior as well. We'll have to wait and see how far north that has an impact. For southeast, we're still looking at some light rainfall, but for many from southwest to south central and Prince William Sound, the trend will be toward drier weather and more stable weather as we get into the weekend. So if you're getting a little tired of the dreary and wet weather, at least in the southern third and southwest, some changes might be coming your way that you'll like. Here's a look at temperatures now. Upper 50s across southeastern Alaska down toward the Dixon entrance. We got a little bit warmer, closer to 60 degrees. 56 in Sitka, mid to upper 50s around Juneau, Haines, and Skagway. 59 in Yakutat today. Prince William Sound saw temperatures closer to 60 degrees. Cordova, a balmy 61. 59 in Seward, same in Kenai, a little bit wetter there, and especially north. 65 in Anchorage, 62 around Talkeetna. About 65 in Fairbanks today, with Eagle showing 60, 62 in Northway, Fort Greely was 66, 57 around Fort Yukon. It was 48 in Anaktuvuk Pass, 30s and 40s for the Arctic coast. A considerably warmer day for many locations there. 40 in Barrow, 42 for AKwx, 39 in Kaktovik, 42 in Wainwright. And Kotzebue Sound temperatures peaked in the lower 60s today. Pretty toasty there. Red Dog Mine also in the lower 60s. 45 in Tin City. Nome showed 57. Unalakleet 59. Galena was 68 just up the road. It was 70 degrees. 68 in Tanana, 69 in McGrath, 59 in Bethel. And you can see some of those cooler temperatures working down the southwestern coast and for many villages as well. 52 in Nunivak Island. Pribilofs were showing temps in the lower 50s. 62 in Kodiak. 50s for the Alaska Peninsula and lower 50s for Adak, Atka, and Shemya at 53. Now, overnight low temperatures will hover in the mid-50s for the interior. Still fairly mild there. A little bit cooler toward the coast in the upper 40s for many. 49 in Nome, 32 for Barrow. Southeast looking at lower 50s. South Central also looking at lower to mid-50s. 52 for Kodiak. Upper 40s and lower 50s for the Alaska Peninsula, and 46 for St. Paul with a high of 53 tomorrow. Upper 60s and lower 70s for most of the upper and lower Yukon Valley all the way to the southwestern coast. Coastal villages will be a little bit cooler, probably upper 50s for many like you see at Nunivak Island. 59 in Kodiak, upper 50s for the Alaska Peninsula. About the same for southeast, but a few of the interior locations will likely warm into the lower 60s if you catch a few sunny breaks. The Arctic coast in the 40s and 50s. Kotzebue Sound a little bit cooler than you saw today, and about 70 or so for Fairbanks. Now, flying weather shows IFR conditions still holding along the coast for the Arctic coast all the way through the Bering Strait, most of the Bering Sea, and the central and eastern chain. For southeast, expect IFR conditions generally south of the low pressure system, but northward, and for most of the interior coastline, expect MVFR at some point in the day, with showers and thunderstorms across the mountains in the interior, otherwise VFR. Anaktuvuk Pass, we expect to see VFR. The same goes for Adigan Pass for your Thursday. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass expected to be VFR. Rainy Pass should be visual flight rule through most of the day. Windy Pass, we expect to see improvements during your Thursday with a chance for showers and storms, though. Isabel Pass should be VFR through most of your day. Mentasta Pass so far looks pretty good. Watch for convection in the afternoon. Tanita Pass, a chance for showers and thunderstorms, but MVFR to start with improvements during the day. And Portage Pass, generally MVFR, but most of that will be on the eastern side. VFR, of course, for Cook Inlet, and we'll be watching for mountain showers and storms there. With IFR to start in Chilkoot and White Pass, we look to see some improvement to VFR as we get toward Thursday afternoon. Now, freezing levels show us the weather pattern aloft, and you'll notice that we have a lot of cold air up across the Arctic coast. Levels down to 2,000 feet there. We've got a cooler patch of air across southwest and most of the Gulf of Alaska with levels at 8,000 feet. But then heading south of the Dixon entrance, they climb to 10 to 12,000 feet. And across the western Bering, a ridge of high pressure in the upper atmosphere is bringing back the warmth for the western Bering. Levels there as high as 14,000 feet. Tomorrow's icing potential is still somewhat small, but it has increased a little bit over what we saw yesterday. And that shows that there is some light icing potential, but high up there, above 10,000 feet for parts of southeast, parts of the Copper River Basin generally east of Prince William Sound, and over parts of the Alaska Peninsula, all the way out to almost Dutch Harbor. You'll see some spotty icing potential out across the Bering Sea. Most of that will be in the west. Otherwise, we're not expecting a whole lot of trouble there. The jet stream shows a pronounced trough across most of the 49th state. Because of that, low pressure has formed right across Bristol Bay and just south. That's keeping the fastest winds out across the Gulf of Alaska with a southwesterly flow coming into the continental United States and western Canada. We also have a little bit of a faster flow right across the Beaufort seacoast at around 50 knots. That's helping to keep the weather in place there. Watch for the trend to push high pressure eastward as we go toward the weekend. That could bring some drier weather your way if you're in the southern half and southeast. Notice light winds for right now across the interior at 9,000 feet, only 5 to 10 knots. A westerly flow remains pretty light across the Brooks Range, but picks up to 25 knots right across the Arctic coast. And you see an east and southeasterly flow working across the southern Bering Sea with several waves of low pressure across the Gulf, and southerlies working across the Dixon entrance from 20 to 40 knots. A slower flow at 3,000 feet in that location, otherwise very slow winds for most of the interior as high pressure continues to settle in across the west coast and south central. Your westerlies are still in place across the Arctic coast at around 15 to 20 knots. And low pressure moving out of the Pacific is stirring up more of an easterly flow from Adak, Atka, and all the way out towards Shemya. Turbulence potential, as I said, with low pressure working to southeast. We'll watch for some bumps and chop right here across central and southern parts of southeast, generally above 1,000 feet though. And you'll see some bumps out across the central and western chain. Other than that, looks like smooth sailing again as high pressure is trying to take command. That's a look at your aviation forecast. We'll have a look at your sea ice edge and your marine weather coming up here in just a few minutes. Stay tuned.
The fire safety goal of landscaping and maintenance is very simple. Reduce the amount of fuel immediately surrounding your home. However, this doesn't mean your landscape has to be barren. Some plants are more fire resistant than others. One of the most important things any wildland homeowner can do is to create a safety zone or fire break around the house using these fire resistant plants.
And there was still some brush that was potentially close enough that could have caused my house to go up if I hadn't taken that out. So it's just keeping that perimeter wide and keeping it free and the cheatgrass down very, very low, I think is what saved my home. It gave the firefighters the perimeter that they needed to get up in here and even do whatever defense they could do to help, you know, any potential engagement with the fire. Because at least they had some room to work.
Your safety zone can consist of numerous varieties of plants, including grasses, border plantings, flowers, and vegetables. Check with your local fire officials about the best species for your area. In most areas, a safety zone should be cleared away from your home for a distance of not less than 30 feet. As the slope of the lot increases, additional clearance as far out as 100 feet may be necessary. Clearance also depends on vegetative conditions that provide ladder fuels that enable fire to climb into trees. Trees and shrubs are fine as long as dead or low-hanging branches are removed and the height of ground vegetation is controlled. Be sure to remove all tree limbs around your chimney as well as any dead branches that may hang over the roof. Accumulated leaves, needles, and other dead vegetation should also be removed. Beyond 100 feet from the house, dead wood and older trees should be removed or thinned. Consult with your local fire officials for specific guidelines appropriate for your location. Keep an eye on any limbs that may come in contact with power lines. If you're not equipped to trim them yourself, call the power company and let them know about the hazard. When it comes to routine maintenance, remember to sweep your gutters, eaves, and roof on a regular basis, especially during the hot, dry weather of the fire season. Tender, dry needles and leaves are a fire waiting to happen. Although it's very convenient to stack firewood under the porch or under the eaves, it's not in your best interest to do so. To say the least, you're inviting trouble. Stack your firewood well away from anything that's combustible, including fences and outbuildings. Outdoor incinerators or burning barrels for household trash are illegal in many areas because they generate wind-blown sparks. If they are allowed, a permit is usually required, so you need to check with your local fire protection agency about laws and ordinances. Your home should have at least 2 ground-level doors as safety exits in case of fire, and each room should have at least 2 means of escape, including a door and a window leading to the outside. This is especially true in bedrooms. Install as many smoke detectors as local regulations require, and ask your fire officials to help you plan and rehearse a home fire escape drill. Regular home fire drills can save your family in an emergency. If you do all these things, especially clearing the safety zone around your house and building a fire-safe roof, you have an excellent chance of protecting your home and family against wildfire. But can these simple precautions really yield such dramatic results? Yes. In fact, the real-life experiences of those who have done these things seem just short of miraculous.
Well, each year I'd taken an axe and cut out the brush and was just cutting that out from around the house in order to make it easy to take the cheatgrass out with a weed eater, a heavy-duty weed eater. And then every year I just kept increasing that distance out from around the house, never knowing how much was going to be enough. You've got to keep that brush clear away from your home so that the fire doesn't have any chance to get up against the side of your house.
The smoke seemed to build up quite a bit, and then I noticed about 10 fire engines coming up the street, and I ran out with the children and said, what should I do? And they said, as quickly as possible, evacuate the house. I looked down at the house, and there were about 200-foot flames almost surrounding the house, and I was sure at that time that the house was gone. A few months before the fire, we heard that you should make sure the sagebrush is cleared away from the house, and he just thought, well, we might start doing that in case there was a fire.
This is beautiful country. It's a privilege and a pleasure to live here. And with that comes a responsibility not only to protect our own property and the safety of our neighbors, but to preserve the resources, the wildlife, and the natural beauty that belong to everyone. Thank you for taking time to watch this program. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to call your local fire department, Wildland Fire Agency, or state forester. Your efforts do make a difference.
Somebody turn off the projector. That's good stuff. Here's a look at the sea ice edge there. You can see the greatest concentrations are north and east of Barrow and north of Dead Horse and Prudhoe Bay, just north of Kaktovik. There's some open water. Now, the areas that we have shown as open water across north of Wainwright and then out into the Chukchi Sea, north of the Hannah Shoal that you see there, it may still have some smaller concentrations of ice, but it's generally listed as open water. The overall movement of the ice right now is slowly dropping to the south, but it looks like in the coming days some of this will start to retreat just a little bit more to the north and northeast. The overall shift of the gyre, of course, is from the east and moving the general concentration, the higher concentrations, generally from east to west. And you can see more about this anytime you want at weather.gov/anchorage/ice.php. It will color code the sea ice concentrations for you and give you a 5-day forecast as well. Check that anytime you like. It's updated daily. Across southeast, look for northerlies coming out of the Lynn Canal up to 15 knots with a 4-foot sea. A little bit further south in the Clarence Strait, the winds are picking up as low pressure moves in from the southwest. Look for southeasterly winds up to 25 knots with a 5-foot sea, and offshore winds from Yakutat all the way down to Sitka from 15 to 20 knots with 6-foot seas in most areas along the outer coast. Westerlies will blow onshore down towards Sitka. You're looking at 5-foot seas, a south wind up to 20 knots in the Clarence Strait, and northerlies continue in the Lynn Canal at 20 knots with a 3-foot sea on Friday. For south central, winds remain light, but you'll start to see a little bit more of a southwesterly flow south of Kenai, about 10 knots with a 2-foot sea. Northeasterlies from Seward down toward the eastern Barren Islands, around 15 knots or so. 3-foot seas there, 4-foot seas east of Kodiak Island on that northeast wind, and light and variable winds inside and outside of Prince William Sound, only at 10 knots. A little bit of a westerly change there as we get into Friday, 10 knots in both areas around Prince William Sound and outside. Westerlies blowing outside of Resurrection Bay in the western Gulf at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Otherwise, light and variable winds up and down Cook Inlet and into Shelikof Strait. Southwesterlies east of the Barrens and also east of Kodiak Island at 15 knots with a 4-foot sea. Around the Alaska Peninsula, we'll see light winds inside of Bristol Bay and northeast flow there at 10 knots. Otherwise, light and variable winds with seas remaining small at about 2 to 3 feet on Thursday, and a little bit more of a northwesterly push in Bristol Bay on Friday with 15-knot winds and a 3-foot sea. Otherwise, no change in most areas around the peninsula. For the Aleutians, look for a light and variable flow around Unalaska, north and south. Otherwise, it's east and northeast winds feeding into low pressure that's advancing toward the western Aleutians on Thursday. Winds up to 15 to 25 knots, small craft advisories in the west, and seas up to 8 feet or so in the western chain. By Friday, a little bit more of an easterly flow across the central chain, 20 to 25 knots with 6 to 8 foot seas there. North and easterly flow on either side of Nikolsky and Unalaska at 15 knots with 2 to 4 foot seas in the eastern end. As we look at the west coast, a light northerly flow coming across St. Lawrence Island stays around 10 knots. We'll see a variable wind around the Pribilofs, also looking for about a 3-foot sea, 2-foot seas south of Nunivak Island into the upper Kuskokwim. Looks like most areas there will continue to see fairly light winds around the Pribilofs. However, as high pressure drops a little bit further south, it makes room for more of a south and westerly flow to pick up across the northern Bering. So some changes noted there on Friday. 15 to 25 knots there across St. Lawrence Island and especially west of St. Matthew. Seas come up to 5 feet there. Otherwise, west and northwesterly winds rounding the northern end of high pressure at 15 to 20 knots with seas holding around 3 feet. For the North Slope, light winds around 10 knots, still coming in for the east for the Beaufort Seacoast. Northeasterlies across the Chukchi Sea, seas ranging from 1 to 3 feet there. By Friday, you'll see a little bit more of a southeasterly flow picking up from 15 knots with seas ranging from 1 to 3 feet in the Beaufort, and southwesterlies picking up to 25 knots, especially south of Cape Lisburne and into the Kotzebue Sound region with 5 to 6 foot seas expected by the end of the week. Recapping tonight's weather, remember, there's enough moisture in the atmosphere over Alaska that if you get a shower or thunderstorm, it may contain brief but heavy rain. Not expecting any watches, warnings, or advisories at this point. There could still be some thunderstorm activity around south central and the interior through the evening hours, but just garden variety rain for southeast and a new weather maker coming in closer to the Aleutians as we head into Thursday. Expect winds to come up there. Showers and thunderstorms a little bit more around the region tomorrow.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.